Hello everyone, and welcome to another Pyro Gaming video. As you can see, we're setting by the fire in the Iron Temple, and that can only mean one thing. It's time for a chat. Only this time, it's not really going to be much of a chat, but rather more of a rant. A rant about something that Bungie did throughout the entire lifespan of Destiny 1, and even though we haven't actually gotten to play Destiny 2 to a full extent, there's already signs that Bungie is doing it again in Destiny 2, from the get-go. From the very beginning of the launch of the game, Bungie's already doing this. And I'm talking, of course, about nerfing PVE to better suit PvP. Now, it's no surprise to anyone, nor is it any kind of secret, that throughout the entire lifespan of Destiny 1, Bungie has continuously nerfed exotics, legendaries, abilities, grenades, all kinds of things. Nerfed them across the board because they were being abused in PvP. Now, because something is being abused in PvP, I don't understand, and I don't think that anybody fully understands, why you also have to nerf it in PvE. There's no reason whatsoever that PvE and PvP cannot be their own separate entities and have their own weapon balancing throughout. Now, Bungie's argument to this is that they want your Guardian to feel the same across every activity in Destiny, and that's fine. That's a very respectable reason for you to do what you're doing. But you look at any other game, you look at Halo's PvP versus PvE, you look at Call of Duty's PvE versus PvP. There's subtle differences in each of those games that separates PvE from PvP. And certain weapons are good in PvE and trash in PvP in every game that you can think of that has both of those entities. There's certain weapons that are better in Crucible than they are in PvE. But then when Bungie goes and nerfs weapons that are primarily PvE weapons, I'm talking about things like Vex Mythoclast, things like Icebreaker, things like Truth. You nerf these weapons because a group of people are abusing them in the Crucible, so that you make them pretty much useless in PvE. And for somebody that doesn't play PvE, which is honestly the majority of the Destiny community, is PvE based, not a whole lot of people enjoy the Crucible. The Crucible definitely has its die-hard contingency, but the majority of this game's player base focuses more on PvE and looks at Crucible as some kind of, little side thing to go do every once in a while. Now, that's not to say that Crucible doesn't have its die-hard fans that would prefer Crucible over PvE, because those people do certainly exist. But the majority, meaning 51% and up, are primarily PvE players. And for the PvE players of Destiny to lose some of their favorite weapons because they're getting abused in an activity that they're not even playing is just silly. Now, you might be asking yourself, but Pyro, how are you already saying that this is happening in Destiny 2? Well, look at the new weapon loadout system. In Destiny 1, it was primary, special, and heavy. Now, the primary could be anything from a scout rifle, pulse rifle, hand cannon, whatever. Secondary, of course, is your snipers, your shotguns, your fusion rifles, your sidearms, and heavy being your rocket launchers, swords, sleeper simulant, which falls into its own category, and heavy machine guns. In Destiny 2, the loadout system will be your slot 1 will be a kinetic weapon, meaning a weapon that is primary based that does not do any kind of elemental damage. It is a kinetic-only weapon, meaning it will have no burn. This is going to be your sidearms with no burn. This is going to be your scout rifles, pulse rifles, auto rifles, hand cannons. It's very similar to what we had throughout the duration of the Taken King, when the only elemental primary that we had in the game from Taken King to Rise of Iron was the Zalo Supercell. That is pretty much unchanged for Destiny 2 if you compare it to the Taken King. Now, instead of a special weapon slot, Destiny 2 will feature an energy weapon slot. Now, your energy weapons are weapons that are primarily made up of elemental burns. However, instead of them being your snipers, your shotguns, and your fusion rifles, it's going to be sidearms, elemental burn hand cannons, elemental burn scout rifles, elemental burn pulse rifles, and things of that nature. So essentially, if you compare it to Destiny 1, we now have 2 slots dedicated solely to primary weapons. Also with the addition of submachine guns for Destiny 2 that we did not have in Destiny 1. But In a sense, this could give you some customization that, we haven't seen in Destiny 1, to the extent of you could run, say, a hand cannon in your kinetic slot and a scout rifle with an elemental burn in your energy slot. That is a pretty neat little combination there, and for that reason, I'm remaining optimistic about it. That's going to allow you to do a lot of things. You're going to be able to have more of a close quarters and long range loadout from your first and second weapons, but at the end of the day, let's be honest, you're still just carrying 2 primary weapons if you're coming from Destiny 1. Now, this is where it gets really, really ridiculous, and this is where it starts to lose me. Instead of the heavy slot, in Destiny 2, you will have power weapons. Power weapons will be comprised of rocket launchers, machine guns, and swords, like Destiny 1's heavy slot, but now, all your special weapons from Destiny 1, your snipers, shotguns, and fusion rifles, are going to move into this heavy slot. So that means now, instead of running a sniper rifle and a rocket launcher, you're going to run either a sniper rifle or a rocket launcher, as well as 2 primaries, or maybe a submachine gun and a sidearm. Now, to a certain degree, this, again, could be beneficial to PvE players. For the simple fact that, like I said, you're essentially going to have 2 primaries, so, with Destiny's ammo economy being what it was in Destiny 1, you're probably not going to run out of ammo nearly as often. I would have to assume that the energy slot for your weapons is going to have, say, for example, if it's a hand cannon, have the same reserve ammo as if that hand cannon were in your kinetic slot and your main weapon, or your primary weapon. But there's no denying that the reason Bungie is changing our weapon loadout system is to better suit PvP. There's no denying that. The snipers, shotguns, fusion rifles, all the things that people spammed in Destiny 1 that were in their special slot are now being moved to their quote-unquote heavy slot, and therefore will not be used nearly as frequently within the Crucible. But this goes back to the topic that I brought up at the beginning of the video, of where, because of the Crucible, PvE players have to suffer. Now, when you think about the ramifications of changing this loadout system, when you think about something as simple as saying that I cannot run a rocket launcher and a sniper rifle at the same time, you're automatically taking off a massive chunk of potential DPS that you could do in raids, strikes, nightfalls, any PvE activity. You're automatically taking off a huge chunk of DPS, so you have to assume that these raid bosses that we're going to get in Destiny 2 are going to be scaled down to compensate for that. Since now it's sniper or rocket launcher, sniper or machine gun, as opposed to having both and having something to fall back on if you don't have ammo for one. This is also going to mean that, assuming the heavy ammo economy is going, or the power ammo economy, I should say, in Destiny 2 is going to be similar to what the heavy ammo economy in PvE for Destiny 1 was, it's going to be the rarest of the ammo drops, meaning you're not going to have nearly as much of it as you're going to have your energy and kinetic weapons. So that being said, it's looking more and more like your primary mode of DPS in PvE is going to come from things like hand cannons and pulse rifles and auto rifles and things of that nature. Now, this is honestly, this is really disheartening because on one hand, it's going to add a completely new element for us to go and attack the bosses in this game, but on the other hand, you're going to have to scale the boss damage back so far to the point that either A, these bosses are going to feel like they're not as strong or not worthy of being considered a boss, or B, it's going to be such a pain in the ass to just sit there and blindly shoot a hand cannon at a boss over and over and over just to do enough damage. I mean, let's be honest. If you look at any of the raids in Destiny's past, even, something like Wrath of the Machine, where Outbreak Prime is actually really good in the Wrath of the Machine raid against Axis and even Vosik, it's still not something that the average player is going to choose over something like Black Spindle or Dark Drinker. So you can kind of be hopeful that, the change in dynamic of how we're going to attack bosses in Destiny 2 is going to make it to where it could be fun, it could be different, but at the same time, in the back of your mind, you're always going to be thinking, I'm shooting a raid boss with a scout rifle, because the Crucible is unbalanced, and at the very core of this change, that's the absolute truth. You're not going to be able to sit there and snipe a boss over and over and over again because people were sniping too much in the Crucible, and that's it. Like, that's at the very core of why these changes are happening, at the very core of why the entire dynamic of how we're going to approach a raid boss, a strike boss, a nightfall boss, or if there's like a Prison of Elders equivalent in Destiny 2, this entire dynamic for PvE players has been changed because Bungie has been unable to successfully balance the Crucible in Destiny 1. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I could rant and rave all day long about how I think that the Crucible in Destiny 1 is just complete trash. I have not set foot in the Crucible since at least December. It was right after Age of Triumphs was released, and the only reason that I went in there that time was because I had some kind of quest that made me go in there for a couple of matches. I don't even remember what the quest is. But I haven't played Crucible in... Or no, I'm sorry, not Age of Triumph, the SRL event when it ended. But the Dawning, that's what I was trying to say. But, you know, as a PvE player, I love my raids. I love strikes. I love doing Challenge of Elders, Prison of Elders. You know, all of the PvE activities I'm a big fan of. And over the course of Destiny, I've seen Gallarhorn get nerfed because of Crucible. I've seen Icebreaker get nerfed because of Crucible. I've seen Truth get nerfed because of Crucible. Weapons that I never used in the Crucible because I didn't play the Crucible, but weapons that I loved using in PvE, and now they're pretty much trash in PvE because of Crucible. Now, I don't think that anybody in the Destiny community, whether you're PvE or PvP oriented, regardless of which side you're on of this debate, I don't think that there's any debate whatsoever as to the fact that PvE and PvP should be separate entities. They should be their own thing. Bring your own abilities in, but maybe scale them back in the Crucible. Bring your own weapons in, but scale them back in the Crucible. Leave PvE untouched. Now, if you have a weapon like Gallarhorn was in Year 1 that's just an absolute boss melter, I can understand why you would scale that back for PvE purposes. But let's look at Vex Mythoclast. Vex Mythoclast is the perfect example of a PvE weapon that got broken because of Crucible. In Vanilla Destiny, when Vault of Glass first released its hard mode, which I think was a couple of, like 2 or 3 weeks after the initial release of Destiny, people started getting their hands on the Vex Mythoclast. Now, the Vex Mythoclast originally was an absolute beast in the Crucible. In PvE, however, it wasn't quite a beast. It wasn't on that Gallarhorn or Icebreaker level, but it was still a very fun weapon to use in Nightfalls with Solar Burn, Nightfalls with Small Arms, once that became a thing after House of Wolves. It was a viable weapon in PvE. And in Crucible, like I said, it was way overpowered. It was way overpowered. That was all you saw in the vanilla Crucible. If people had Vex Mythoclast, that was what they were using. So Bungie, being Bungie, said, all right, well, we're just gonna take this exotic that is pretty good in PvE, but overpowered in PvP, and we're just gonna slam it so far into the ground that you could shit on it for 3 years, and it's so deep in the ground that that shit won't even touch it. Like, we're just gonna take it and just cram it so far into the fucking ground that it's going to be melted by the Earth's core, and that is exactly what Bungie did. So now, all of a sudden, you have this weapon that was really fun in PvE, and by the way, very good in Vault of Glass, because it absolutely melted oracles. And now, it is just a husk of what it used to be. It is literally just a slot filler in your exotic weapon kiosk. And it's not because it was overpowered in PvE, it's because it was overpowered in the Crucible. They took a fun weapon that a whole bunch of people in the community absolutely loved using in PvE and just threw it away. Just trashed it because of Crucible. It's got to stop, guys. It absolutely has to stop. If Destiny is ever going to be the game that Bungie perceives it to be, which I think Destiny is a great game, but it absolutely has its flaws. The same thing, or another thing that I will say is that I do believe that Bungie has good intentions every time they rebalance these weapons, every time they nerf something, buff something, whatever the case may be. And I feel like their intentions are good across the board as to why they're doing it and how they're doing it. But PvE players should not be punished because PvP players are out there spamming the easiest kills possible. That's not how you fix a game. You don't just say, oh, well, we're just going to nerf this into the ground because we don't know how to balance it. We don't know how to make it balance, so we're just going to cram it into the dirt. All right, they did the same thing with fusion rifles. Fusion rifles in year one were good in PvE. They were not overpowered. The only one that I would say was maybe overpowered was Pocket Infinity, but Pocket Infinity was so glitchy that it hardly ever worked right anyway, so it's kind of a moot point. But fusion rifles in PvP were overpowered. So what does Bungie do? Slams them into the ground, nerfs them so hard that they become absolutely unusable throughout the entire course of the Taken King. And it isn't until here recently, by which I mean within the last 6 months or so, that fusion rifles are slowly starting to become viable weapons again. And it's because Bungie finally said, okay, well, we're going to increase the damage in PvE and keep the damage in PvP down. The way that they made fusion rifles viable again right now in Destiny 1 is by separating them in PvE and PvP. Now, I could go on about this for hours, guys. We're already over 15 minutes for this video. I could literally sit here and rant about this for hours upon hours because it's something that's bugged me ever since this game came out. And the only thing that I can say is you guys need to let Bungie know that you have a problem with things like this. Go to their Twitter accounts, comment on their Twitter posts, comment on the forums on Bungie.net. You have to let Bungie know we're not okay with this. Otherwise, they're just going to keep doing it, and they're going to ruin Destiny 2 like they ruined Destiny 1 as far as weapon balancing. Another thing that Bungie needs to do is not wait 6 to 9 months to deploy a weapons patch when a weapon is being spammed or abused. They won't know what we want unless we tell them. If we go and complain about this stuff to Bungie, they will hear our voices and they will fix it, and then Destiny can be the game that we want, instead of be the game that they think we want, but they aren't 100% sure. All I know is that going forward into Destiny 2, Destiny 3, Destiny 4, however many of these things they decide to make, PvE and PvP need to be separated. That's going to bring this video to an end, guys. If you enjoyed it, click like. If you're new to the channel, click subscribe. And if you're already subscribed, I fucking love you. Comment down below. Let me know how you feel about this. Thank you for watching. Take care, guys.